Hello, Mike.
Well, hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite pandemic and post-pandemic. And what is this? Is today the third
Endemic.
anniversary? Did I see that?
We're
Today's
in the endemic podcast now.
the endemic podcast.
Yes.
My name is Steve Conley. I'm a web cartoonist. I do the webcomic series The Middle Age, which you can read at middleagecomic.com. It's at Webtoons, Tapas, and Go Comics. And I would be remiss if I did not mention my co-host, the Tower of Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the majestic maestro of mark making, Mike Manley.
Good evening, everyone. Well, thank you for such a lovely introduction, Mr. Conley.
Your name just begs alliteration, Mike.
I know. It's like I was created by Stan Lee, like Bruce Banner, Mike Manley, you know?
And our third, the third of the triad, JAMAR NICHOLAS is not with us. He's still on assignment working on Leon, and he'll be joining us really soon. So thank you all for being here. Tonight's topic is one that's near and dear to me, and the guys seemed very excited to talk about it. We're going to talk about Kickstarters and crowdfunding in general, but Kickstarters mostly. But before we get to that, anything to catch us up on, Mike?
Well, today, ironically, or maybe it's not ironically, today is the 13th anniversary of me drawing Judge Parker. I don't think we've had a podcast actually on the actual day, but yeah, so 2010, April 15, 2010 was the debut, my first strip. And I actually posted on my Facebook page today. You can see the first strip of the that I had done. And in the beginning of the strip, I took over from Ed Barretto, who had been doing it, who had gotten sick, and they needed someone to fill in. So I did it for a little while. My friend John Hebing did it for a little while. And then, unfortunately, Eduardo passed away. So my tryout turned into being something permanent. So, but in the beginning, they actually asked me, there's something funny about the newspaper business. They wanted me to imitate Barretto's style. And I couldn't, they didn't want me to sign my name because they were always very afraid that suddenly readers would, pick up their newspaper and Mike Manley, they'd immediately.
Editors looking for any excuse to drop a strip.
Yeah, it's funny. So I imitated, and Eduardo had done the same when the previous artist, the longest running artist on the strip, Harold Ledoux, had retired, and Eduardo took over from him, and he had to sort of imitate his style. So it's sort of like he imitated Ledoux, I imitated Eduardo. So I don't know if if I kick the bucket tomorrow and they get somebody else, they're going to have to imitate my style. I don't know. It's it's sort of a very strange. It was very different than comics. Very different than comics. Where in comics, the only example I could draw was when Kirby left the Fantastic Four and Marvel and went to DC. They put John Romita on the Fantastic Four, and he kind of tried to do sort of a Kirby sort of feel, and then they brought John Buscema in, and then even for a while, Rich Buckler did it, when I was a kid and I started buying Marvels in the mid 70s, new Marvels, he was doing the FF and he was totally doing a Kirby
Mm-hmm.
riff.
I liked his Kirby. I liked his Kirby riff.
Yeah, I loved it as a kid because I loved Kirby. So I was like, oh, there's this other guy doing the Kirby thing. So yeah, it's sort of, you know, in newspaper strips, when one artist passes on, they usually have the assistant or somebody comes in and does the, you know, like Popeye still looks like Popeye, right? Prince Valiant still kind of looks like Prince Valiant, you know. Not as much in comic books, but definitely in comic strips. So yeah, that was sort of a new experience for me. I'm in what 4,628 strips later. Here I am.
Do you have a favorite, Mike, of the 4,600
Yeah.
strips you've done?
Yes, the one I just finished yesterday. That's the brand bouncing new baby boy. You know?
June 12th, 2013 was my favorite.
Yeah. But sort of interesting to see even myself, my transition on the strip to when I could do it sort of my own thing, and then sort of like I'm doing it now, because also the writers changed. So Woody Wilson was the writer when I came on, and then he left the strip, and Francesco took over. And when he took over, the story sort of changed. So that sort of kind of changed my style in a way, or how I approach it, because he writes very different types of stories than what Woody did. Woody wrote stories that were probably closer to what the strip had been traditionally, and then Francesco writes a lot. He has a lot more dialogue in his stories, and so that definitely is different than when I worked with Woody. I have to leave a lot more room, and we went from very often having 3 panels per strip to down to being 2. So, and that's something that a lot of those continuity strips did, is they went from 3 panels a day down to 2 panels a day. And I think part of it was that people are more impatient now. So somehow like 2 panels a day seemed like it was more or bigger or something. I don't know, but a lot of the strips went to.
That's interesting. I would have thought it would have been the other way around.
Yeah. So we went down to, occasionally I'll do 2. I mean, 2 on the Phantom. Like this week I'm doing a lot of 1 panel strips. Then there's a 3 panel strip, and then there's a 2 panel strip. And usually the 1 panel strips are like, you know, Panorama,
right?
Or Tony DePaul might write characters having dialogue when they're moving through a scene. And if you make that a 1 long strip, it's easier to sort of float the balloons and create, you know, an interesting composition. You know, every strip is different. So there's a big difference between those 2 strips.
We don't cover this very often, Mike. So where, if people want to read the Phantom and see your work on Judge Parker, where online can they go?
Well, the best place to go is the Comics Kingdom, which is the King Features' own website, comicskingdom.com. It might be in your own newspaper. It might be online for your newspaper. It might be, I know the Seattle Times, a lot of people, when the Comics Kingdom site would be down, a lot of people would go to the Seattle Times, and they would see it there. There's various places on, I think some of them were on Go Comics, but Comics Kingdom is the best place because you can see them all.
Well, regarding the 2 panel question, we got a question from JRD on YouTube. Hey, JRD, is it 2 per day harder on storytelling because the formula is usually panel 1 recap, panel 2 advancement, panel 3 setup, or cliffhanger? Is that do you find it more harder to work it all in, or
No. I mean, it's how much the writer wants to put in per day, and I think the standard used to be 13 weeks for a story. It was about 13 weeks for a story. 3 panels a day, and occasionally, a big panel, meta panel, if something was going on. But I think also due to the fact that the size of the strips has gotten progressively smaller and smaller and smaller, when you go to 2 panels a day, the art, everything's a little bit bigger. When you go to 3 panels, it's a little bit smaller. Even I was looking at some older strips, there are 4 panels in a day, 4 panels in a daily. But back then, your daily might be
right,
side of a hot dog or something, might be like that big. Now they're very small in the paper and often squished, distorted, so
well, congratulations, Mike. That's awesome.
Well, thank
13
you.
years.
Why, thank you. And congratulations to you. I hear you had a success, a successful launch.
It's a very topical topic this evening, talking about Kickstarters. So it's a perfect segue, Mike. But before we do that, I just want to jump in and just say, everybody, if you're watching this on Facebook, please be sure to hit the emote in some fashion, hit the thumbs up or a love or something like that. Show us some love there. And if you're on the YouTubes, please hit the subscribe button and the like button and all the other. Just click on everything randomly. And we want 1,000 subscribers on YouTube by the time Jamar comes back. That'll be our surprise for him.
Well,
So
we're getting close. We're getting close.
YouTube.com/pencil TO So please do subscribe. But as Mike was saying, I launched a Kickstarter today. That wasn't necessarily the intent. I was going to launch it last week, but I was a little under the weather. I wanted to prepare more. And then I was going to launch it yesterday, but I didn't want to launch on Valentine's Day. So I launched it this morning. But my readers are all very romantic people, and they would not have been available yesterday.
They were all out at a Cinnabon buying sweets for their sweetie, right?
Long stemmed cinnamon rolls. And hey, it turned teen. So today we'll talk about Kickstarters. I've run 8 of them. I'm currently running my 8th one. It just launched today. If you want to check it out, it's at deathdealing.com. It's very much focused on the role-playing game side of things. I write it and I illustrate it, but it's not comics per se. It does take place in my fictional world. It's tangential to my fictional world.
Now, which fictional world? This is the fictional world of
the Middle Age.
Okay.
My fantasy webcomic. It's so initially there's a wizard in the story who's an intoximancer. I made a D&D rule, so if you want to play a drunken wizard, just like in my story, here's how you can do it. And that was such a hit that it made me inspired me to do more of them. So the next one is for if you're a rogue, which is kind of a hiding in the shadows, what would have been a thief in the original Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of this a character that hits not often but hits very hard. This character gets to throw cards and does damage. People immediately say Gambit. My inspiration was absolutely more like Bullseye and like card magicians like Ricky Jay, who would just throw, he'd take a playing card and throw it and it would go right into a watermelon or something like that. It would just pierce whatever he was throwing it at. And that's the kind of stuff I was thinking of. So anyway, it's very
silly,
but it's just launched today. Thanks so much, everybody, for kind words.
Yeah.
And who would do comic book stuff on Valentine's Day? Our resident romantic, Tom Zoller. So let's talk about Kickstarters. I think it would give everyone a primer. Not everyone's run one before. I kind of have a sense of how to do this. I've coached a few people in the past. And Mike, interrupt me at any moment so I don't ramble incessantly. And then if you've got questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them by the end.
Now, the topic, I think, covers anything that you want to do, whether it be a book or a comic, right? Because you've done Kickstarters for your comics, and now you're doing Kickstarters for your books. So would you say that it's sort of a lot of the principles apply to either or?
I think so. 5 of my Kickstarters were for graphic novels or comics. So there is my focus is that, and I have noticed that there's a distinction between the audiences of comics versus the audience of games. Like if you're going to support a Kickstarter, for instance, and you want to get a book from somebody, odds are you want the person to sign it. And in the gaming world, that's not a thing. The people who are buying a game don't necessarily want the book signed.
Will you sign my dice?
Yeah, it's because also in the world of games, it's usually not a single writer and artist creating the thing. It's almost always a team of people. So who would sign it? You know, the lead designer, the producer, something like that. There are very few. Although the Marvel superhero role-playing game that just is coming out now was written had a primary author, and Matt Forbeck. Hopefully I got his name right. I think it's Matthew Forbeck. So I mean, I could see someone wanting to get that side, especially because it's Marvel. And JRD saying I gave him some input in his Kickstarters. So yeah, I think every one of these principles is primarily for the comics world because that's where I got my footing, and I've only recently dipped my toe into the role playing side of things. So like Mike has with the past couple of episodes, I put together a quick outline. This isn't a cheat sheet. This isn't a fill in the, how do I do this? Add to stream. This isn't necessarily a, fill in the blanks and you'll have a successful Kickstarter, but this is the sort of outline that we're going to go through. And it's not going to be, hopefully we're going to zip through some of this stuff. When I say benefits of Kickstarter, I'm going to just jump right into it. I'm presuming everyone here knows what Kickstarter is, that it's a crowdfunding platform where you propose a project and then you'll have to tell your audience about that project. And Kickstarter has its own built-in audience. People will come that look at a page describing what that project will be, and you have to convince them to part with money for a project that you'll deliver sometime in the future.
It's sort of like GoFundMe, right? I mean, GoFundMe is the same thing. You say, I had an operation or my pet is sick, and they have it set up to you give your credit card, I assume, right? It's all credit card. And then you say, okay, take my $5, take my, $20, my $30, whatever the cost of the project is, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the page of Kickstarter has lots of things called risks and challenges mentioned everywhere, basically saying when you pledge to this Kickstarter campaign, that's really Kickstarter's out of it at that point. They've facilitated the relationship. They've gotten their cut of the money. And at this point, it's between you and the person who's supplying the items to deliver on what they promised. And there's tons of stories in comics about creators who have collected money and not delivered on what they promised. A lot of people have been burnt by that.
Legendary ones, right? There were some legendary ones, right? Like people who made a lot of money and then never.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Or there's currently a system where I think if you can't run two campaigns concurrently, but that hasn't stopped some people from creating alternate accounts and running them separately. Like this isn't, this is business A and business B are in fact the same business, but they're running concurrent campaigns just to keep the money flowing. They're going to collect money from one campaign to pay for the last one, that sort of thing.
So now if you run a Kickstarter and you don't fulfill, you don't send out whatever it is that you make, does Kickstarter flag you from ever doing another one?
They've introduced reporting mechanisms and review mechanisms so that if a person does not fulfill, is problematic, that they'll be flagged in that way, and people can see that. There's also a tendency, like if you poison that well, you're not going to be welcome back, because a lot of what makes Kickstarter work is return customers and word of mouth. So if you deceive people, or if you disappoint people, deliver something horribly late, deliver something less than what they expected, they just won't come back for round two. And in comics, that tends not to be that big a deal. I mean, yes, there are some campaigns now that raise a lot of money with like metallic covers and things like that. And if you don't deliver that, that is a high ticket item. That might be a couple $100. But for the most part, comics Kickstarters, we're dealing with $10 items, $25 items, things like that, where it's not grand theft. It is it's more like low level malfeasance, and you're basically persona non grata after that.
It's like you went to Grubhub, you ordered your sandwich, they delivered it next door.
Yeah, the reporting isn't quite as severe as transparent as, say, Uber or Lyft or something like that. But it is there. Like I did notice that my account has a kind of a reliable or some sort of a positive attribution associated with it. So if people coming in cold, that they can maybe have a little bit more hope that I'll deliver what I want to deliver. But
so you said you've done what? How many now?
This is my 8th one. Yeah, and I think they've had pretty good success given my relative popularity and my goals. Each one has been a success in that it's reached its funding goal and I've delivered the rewards. And I think that's one of the reasons why I have people who come back campaign after campaign. That's to me the overall philosophy of Kickstarter is people have seen early on Kickstarter, someone will do a Kickstarter campaign to make a tuna sandwich and they'd raise $1 million.
Right.
So it has a lottery quality to it. And, a lottery isn't a plan, so everything I'm going to talk about is more about the plan. How do you do this? How do you build it up? And maybe you'll strike it rich, but that's, maybe you'll do the Keanu Reeves book, like Boom has done these Kickstarters that have, they get major news attention.
Right. Well, I think the first time I remember hearing about Kickstarter was, what was like, it was like macaroni salad or egg salad or some weird thing like that,
Yeah.
that somebody got like $1 zillion to make this, it was like, it wasn't like a book or a film or something. It was like all this money they raised to make chicken salad or egg salad or something like that. But
yeah, and that's a lot like the bumping up the stock price of GameStop. It's much more of that sort of mentality of this is a bunch, let's jump on this thing and have fun with it. Whereas I think there are some communities like Order of the Stick figure fantasy webcomic that I think raised $1 million with its campaign. And we'll talk about when you raise money with Kickstarter, what that means. That was really just a rabid fan base who was really excited about what was going on. And I think that's so that was really kind of a eye opener for a lot of cartoonists to see, because people are also being dismissive of a stick figure comic making that much money, but it's only stick figures. I'm like, well, it's fairly funny. It's like saying, it's like knocking the marginalia comics of Mad Magazine for not being lush. It's like it's right for what it is.
Right. Well,
nice comment from Telemont here talking about, I had delays in my last Kickstarter because I was hit by like 2 hurricanes. And I let everybody know about it, and they were very great. That's a big deal about, if you're going to do a Kickstarter, staying in touch with your backers, keeping them informed, letting them know, because part of the fun for the people who back a campaign is sometimes just to be let in on the process, just like we have this show. People want to know, okay, where is this at? If I ordered pins for a project once and just sat on a dock in China for months.
Remember that? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And people were interested in the story of how those pins were going to finally, if they were ever going to arrive.
So when you do you announce your campaign, I know we'll get into the specifics of it, but then you go back and you update people as you're like, hey, the book is going to the printers, the book's at the dock.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of me taking him to the post office to kind of.
Yeah, I had pictures of the postal worker carting the books away, or my car loaded up with boxes. So every time you create a campaign page in Kickstarter, it has kind of a blog associated with it. You can post an update, and then you post an update whenever you feel comfortable posting an update. They don't all get read. I think people who back a lot of projects get a lot of updates all the time, and so I wouldn't count on them all being read, but many of them do.
Now, did you find that from the first time you did it to the last time you did it, did you find that you do more updates to let people know about the process?
I try not to be annoying. I try to post as little as only when I absolutely have to. I feel like here's a justification to post. I don't want it to be spammy or waste anybody's time. I don't think it's changed. I think if the project's gotten more, if there's more drama somehow involved with it, hey, I got hit by a second hurricane, that was worth mentioning. Or when the books arrive, an unboxing is always great. Things like that. But there's tons of news during the course of a production where, especially if you're sharing photographs of the process, people dig that because it shows that things are moving forward. It's when you go radio silent and people start asking questions and you don't respond. So it's also key. They can ask questions. They can comment on the project at any time. I think it's really important to jump in and answer as soon as you can to show people that you're on top of things.
Right.
So because they've given you money and they're just
exactly.
waiting at that point.
Right. So I know it's having printed books myself and everything, but there's a process before you get to the Kickstarter, because you're asking people to back a project, but you have to know how much the project is going to cost, right?
Yes.
You have to do all your homework with finding a printer, how long you figure it's going to take you to produce the particular project.
Yep.
I know some people advertise it.
Yep.
Before they do it. Some people do a lot of it before they advertise it. Do you do that? I mean, because one of the things that happens is if you say, here's 3 pages from my comic, you get kickstarted, it funds, and you go, oh, now I got to sit down. Oh boy, I got to sit down now. And
that is such a comic thing to say. I love it, Mike. That's exactly what it feels like, where, you've done your little preview, you get the money, and now you have to do the work. It's much better to pay us at the end. We have that kind of pay us when it's done ethic. The gaming world is very different, where they will collect money for a project that won't deliver until, August of 2024. I don't even know how you predict printing prices that far ahead. But you're absolutely right. There's a ton of this, and I'll try to blow through this list, Mike, and then it might cover a lot of the ground there. But there's a couple of different strategies. I like for my comic to have everything 95, 90, about 95% done before I solicit a Kickstarter. I mean, if the pages aren't done, I don't want to solicit it. I might owe 3 or 4, but my graphic novels are usually about 100 pages, and I won't solicit until I'm on page 95 or 96.
No, but now in the case of something like the Middle Age, you're reprinting stuff that's already been drawn.
Right. That's my strategy, is like I create a web comic, I share it often as I can, and when that becomes the audience building tool and mailing list building tool, so that when there's finally a book available, that people can get the high quality version of the thing they've been reading. Sort of like selling the DVD set to people who love the TV show.
Right. But have you done that one where you go, okay, here's my project, here's my comic, I'm going to kickstart it. And if it goes, then I got to go. And, how long it's going to take me to produce my pages so I can get it to the printer, so I can get it printed and get it,
I haven't done that in the comics. The only time I've ever done that comics, it's kind of bitten me in the butt. Like I would do a stretch goal. Okay, a stretch goal is kind of this thing. I don't know how familiar people are with them. stretch goal is kind of a goal after the goal. You set a goal for your campaign. So the basic rule of Kickstarter is it's an all or nothing system. You set up a price. We're going to hit $2,000. We need $2,000 to make our campaign happen. And even figure out how you choose that number, because you decide what that number is a little bit of a internal processing. So you come up, we're going to hit 2,000. Then if we hit that number, then the project is a go, and everyone who backs it will get their rewards. And if you don't reach that number, the campaign, people say, oh, that Kickstarter failed. It simply didn't meet its goal. I don't really see it as a failure, because you can always just resolicit it. And 95% of the people who backed it the first time will come back. You just tweak a few things, get a few more email addresses to mail out. I never really think of those things as a failure. I think of them as just, the first at bat. You get it. You can simply resolicit it again. There's no limit to the number of times you can try to.
Now, what happens if you get really, let's say $2,000, and what if you got to like, 1,990 and you needed that last $10? That's where
mom usually kicks in some money on most people. I think there's a Portlandia episode about that or something like that. They were $5,000 shy of their $6,000 goal or something like that, and so they had somebody come in and help them out. And there's a lot of people have that backup plan. You can't donate to your own campaign. That is one of the things you can't do. They won't let you. They won't let you make up the difference, but you can bug mom.
Right. So there are steps that you have to do before you even get to the kickstarting, because you have to figure out how much it's going to cost you, right, and how much time it costs you in time and cost to actually make whatever that it is, a book, comic, poster.
Yeah, and whenever you see that total on the Kickstarter page, just know that 10% is being taken by Kickstarter and the credit card companies. That's how they stay in business, right? The credit card companies get their 5% and Kickstarter gets their 5%. So if you see a $2 million campaign, $200,000 is
right off the top.
Fees, right off the top. If you charge $10 for shipping, they take $1. Right. So if you figured out the price of your envelope, it's $10 to ship, you better charge $11 because they're going to take $1. So everything you see, every step along the way, just 10% is going to go away. And you got
there's a lot of math, is what you're saying. A lot of figuring out logistics and math so that what you asked for actually cover what you need.
Right. And that's super key. And it involves building a lot of wiggle room. Got a question here from Bill on YouTube. Steve, am I understanding correctly that the graphic novels you've kickstarted are collections of your webcomics? That's exactly right. For the Middle Age Volume 1 and Volume 2, and I did a collection of Astounding Space Thrills, which again was a webcomic of mine. Those were all printed collections of my webcomics that were printed through print on demand. They weren't even large-scale printing processes. I used Ingram Spark, or I've used Mixam, or I've used Kablam for various projects. There is a bunch of print-on-demand printers, and the general rule is you try to figure out whatever your cost is and triple it, and that's the price you should make your books. I can't do that with the Ingram books. They cost too much. These are full color. They're hardcover. I make about $10 a book. I wish I could make more, but and the margins are getting tighter because of printing costs are going up. Because one of the things is, getting back to the setup of the campaign, Mike. When you start the campaign, you've got to figure out when it's going to start, when it's going to end, what your goal is going to be. Like, how much money do you need to make this thing happen? A lot of the projects I've done are going to be like, I'm going to do this project anyway. So I don't need to I don't have to shoot for the moon. I'd like to make $10,000, but I'm going to shoot for $2 million. And if I get that, I'm going to make this project no matter what. And if I hit my goal, the goals I set are enough for me to make the project. They're not enough for me to be flush. It's not going to pay my bills. It's basically this project gets made, and then I'm going to sell the books at conventions or through my website, or send them to my Patreon supporters. So my goals are always very realistic. That doesn't have to be how you're going to do it. But the Kickstarter I ran this morning had a goal of $2,000, which could have been considered very modest. Um, but it hit its goal in 30 minutes. And so that's all I need to do. And it takes the pressure off me. And that's better for my personality. I could have set the goal as $8,000 and I could be sweating it for the next couple of weeks. Or for all I know, psychologically, that gets the audience to be more invested in, hey, let's get more. Maybe I'll bump up my, I don't know. I feel that's a lot of pressure to put on the audience. And I don't know. It suits me just fine to hit my goal and kind of have a lot less weight on my brain. So not only do you have to set the goal, the start time, the start day, the end day. Let's talk about that really briefly. I know we're jumping all over the place, but I like to start on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday before noon. I like it to be the middle of the week, not a Monday, because everyone's bogged down with emails on Monday. Fridays, they're just thinking about the weekend. So a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday before noon, because your biggest days of your campaign are going to be the first day, the second day, and the last day. It's this, let me get the camera angle right. It's a spike on day one, less on day two, fallow period of it's like a horseshoe, and the last day is everyone gets their bids in at the end.
So has that been consistent with
Yes.
all of your campaign? Is that sort of, and have you talked to other Kickstarter people and found that to be true?
That is largely the case. I've had difference in the gaming world in that it is easier to cross promote a campaign. For instance, if I'm running a Kickstarter for a book that's for the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and someone else is running a book for the 5th edition, running a campaign for a book for the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, when I post one of my updates, I will include a mention, hey, go check out that person's campaign. And they'll do the same for me. And on those days, I'll get a spike because suddenly a group of people who are already in Kickstarter system, they've already got their credit cards on file, they've already got their logins and passwords, and they're already into this kind of stuff, will suddenly be exposed to this thing. And with my last campaign, specifically for that book, I had spikes throughout the whole time. It was remarkable.
So, but in general, if you were like putting on
for the middle age, it's a trough. And that other things to keep in mind. So Kickstarter and the credit cards will take 10%. There are days during your campaign where you can have a negative day because a pledge can be unpledged. A person can say, and good for them. I mean, if they have their priorities are they got a medical bill or something is gonna, they can just go in and say an unpledge, and you'll have days that you're negative. So there's a bar chart showing progress or not progress, but each day's totals, and you can have a negative day, which is a kick in the guts, which was one of the reasons why I don't watch it. I don't watch it that closely because of that.
So I guess because people could get their credit card canceled or whatever. Yeah, there could be things that come up, right? Yeah. So, how much? No, I'm assuming it probably faster. How much time? Since most people who are watching us are going to be making probably comic books, so you have to figure out how many pages, right? And where you're going to get it printed, and you have to figure out your shipping, and all the logistics of how from you to the customer,
right?
And how much time does it usually take you to do that?
Which part of it, Mike?
The pre-planning, the logistics part before you launch your campaign.
They're all rolling. Each one is. I'll think about it. I'll work on it for 6 months. Not steady, but it's something that has to keep cooking and kind of, refining and refining and refining it. I have tons of note documents where it's going to be a Kickstarter for, here are the tiers, and it goes completely off the rails. I ignore those notes later on because I decide to simplify it, or I decide to, suddenly this new Kickstarter I'm doing is going to have a deck of cards. So I've got to find a printer who makes cards. A lot of the things I do, I add time to the end. However long I think it's going to take me, I add a month or two. I get more I'm trying to be more proactive about that, to give everything more wiggle room, especially given that, supply chain issues. Um, and also I have stretch goals. Again, talking about stretch goals being goals after your goals. They're kind of ways of keeping people excited along the way. If our goal is $2,000, then I had a stretch goal that was at $3,000. We'll print the book with better paper. And if we hit our goal of $4,000, I'll add more content. And those things, that work isn't done. That's work that I'm only going to do if we unlock it, and that's going to add production time. And so I let people know about that. Hey, we unlocked this thing. That's going to add some time to production. Again, just transparency, letting people know that that's
you're thinking about this. I mean, you sort of have to figure out what your stretch goals, or what people would think of as a bonus. It's like, you get your book, but if I get $5,000, you get the book with a fancy cover, or I get the book with, or if we get $6,000, you get the book with 10 extra pages of art or whatever. I mean, right. You have to know what that entails, like how much longer it's going to take you to print it. I took taken a couple seminars, one on kickstarting. When you and I were talking about it, and there was a guy who did a Kickstarter, an artist. I think it was a sketchbook. And, he sort of chronicled, I think everything was on Muddy Colors, which is a great website. And the guy chronicled his process, and he'd never done it before. And he found out that, you can ask for something, or you could say, okay, I'm going to give you a poster, or I'm going to give you whatever trinket or some other extra thing. That ended up costing him so much more money that he didn't really plan on. And so also, are you having all the books shipped to your house? Or are you having your books shipped to a fulfillment center? Which I'm sure you were going to cover that too, right? So there's all these little, and then the other thing was that one guy was having his books printed in China. And he waived the insurance. He didn't take out extra insurance, and his books got printed, but they somehow were damaged. They were damaged, and so he basically had to reprint a whole bunch of the books, and it basically ate up all of his profits. And if you pay for the insurance, and they're smashed in transit, they're destroyed, the ship sinks, they got to reprint them.
Right. And that's why that's a key thing, is taking care of those insurance things. That's a big deal along the way. And that's one of the reasons why the goal is to, you figure out the cost for a thing, and then triple it. And that's your price plus 10% on Kickstarter, because they're going to take their 10%. And that way you've got the wiggle room. So when it comes time to ship it to, let's say, France, and it's a $100 order, that you can pay for the proper insurance, so that if it gets lost, you'll get reimbursed. And that's key, especially when I do international orders. I'm always buying the insurance. And if you're going to order from Ingram Spark, if you use their cheapest level of shipping, that does not include any insurance. And if the books come mangled, you're out of luck. You chose the cheap shipping. So you got to go up. You got to take a step up to the like UPS ground, and not, whatever the
guerrilla ground, where they just kind of skip it along the ground.
Exactly. It's like one guy just kicking your books across 3 state lines.
Exactly. Yeah. Some lummox just kicking your book for like 500 miles till it's delivered.
We got a couple of comments. One's from a JAMAR on YouTube. Good to see you, JAMAR. Once you go live, you better promote your butt off like your life depended on it. That's part of it. It's the least fun part of it, because you launch your campaign, you have that great first day, you have that great second day, and then it's just doldrums. And I think people kind of go a little crazy. They start to promote a little too much. They don't have anything to say. They don't have anything new to say. But that's the cool thing about being as a cartoonist, as an artist. Save stuff from your campaign. Don't share the important stuff. Okay, let's get back to the campaign page for a moment. It's really important that campaign page presents your work as real. It has to look good. It has to look professional. You don't have to look like Disney. You don't have to look like Marvel, but you have to look competent, and you have to show them, I think, a finished product. You have to make it look like a comic book. It's a Photoshop mock-up or an online equivalent. If you go to a website like mockupworld.co, look for Photoshop mock-ups. You can find a book. It's a Photoshop file. You double click on it. There's a thing you paste the graphic into, and it will, you close out that smart object in Photoshop, and it'll look like there's a book. Your
presentation.
Yeah, it will look real, and it helps people to see roughly what they're getting. I always want to label it as a mock-up, not final design, but seeing something real will help them go, okay, that's what I'm getting. And that's all they want to see. They want to see what they're getting. So if you check out my current campaign, deathdealing.com, you'll see that, and I always get the URL for whatever it is. The very first thing is a picture of the two covers of the book. So you can see what you're getting. It's a hardcover and a zine. It's pretty simple. So check out Photoshop mockups. But I save a lot of artwork to share along the way on social media. So I have a thing to say, like, here are the minis I sculpted, or here's my favorite panel from the story. Here's my favorite page from the story. Make it so that you're not just going, buy my book, or linking to Kickstarter over and over again, because the algorithms don't like links. They don't like to be sent away from their walled gardens.
Well, this is something that you learned or you improved on with each campaign, right?
Oh yeah, there's tons of. I don't know how much we can actually cover in the amount of time we'll have, but I want to jump to a couple of tips. One of the things is, if you're going to create stretch goals or bonus items, make sure they're smaller than the actual object you're mailing out. You want lightweight, tiny objects that you can just slide into the box. One of the projects I did, my very first Kickstarter, I decided I'm going to include an 11 by 17 print with it. And so the box got bigger, and that was a big mistake. It was really dumb. So don't include things larger or heavier if you can avoid it. Try to make your bonus items things like PDFs and stuff like that. Shelly asks a question on the YouTube. Hey, Shelly. How does this affect your taxes? You have to report it. As a freelancer, it is income. I believe Kickstarter sends you a 1099.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, I mean, now it's just like PayPal or eBay. If the IRS can look at your bank account and go, look, man, here's all this money coming in from eBay here. What's that? I mean, my accountant does that. He'll be doing that within the next month. He'll be looking at all my stuff and going like, well, what's that? Yeah. What's that there?
You can see that, because usually it's like Stripe or whatever you use for your for the payment system, and we're jumping all over the place. After the campaign ends, you get paid exactly 2 weeks later, unless there's a glitch with their system. 2 weeks later, you will get whatever the total was minus about 10%. And so yeah, it's easy to keep track of that stuff, and yeah, you got to pay it on your taxes. There's a question from Cutthroat Comics on YouTube asked to add the cost for the editor, colorist, and artist drawing your comic. That's absolutely a thing you can do. There's nothing there are some Kickstarters that set goals of $10,000, some that have set goals for $60,000, whatever the total is that they need to do to hire all the people, because if it's a project that hasn't been created yet, it's sort of like software at that point. There are some people who just create a trailer for their movie, or let's talk about a TV show or a movie. They create the trailer, and now they want the $1 million to make the thing. So you can create a Kickstarter to try to raise money for any aspect of the cost of the thing. And some people on their campaign page will include a little pie chart showing here's where the money will be spent. None of my projects have ever been that complicated. It's always like book. There's a solid circle that says book with a 10% wedge cut out for a Kickstarter and for the credit card folks. And Tom Zoller is confirming that there's a 1099 from I believe he's confirming there's a 1099 from Kickstarter.
Oh,
and Telemon asks a wonderful question. What's your opinion about digital only content? I love it. Now, so my Kickstarters for games and for comics, the PDF of my graphic novel might be $8. So I'd have to sell a lot of them to have kind of some record-breaking campaign, but fulfillment is a dream.
Hold on a second, Steve. I think I'm going to avoid an emergency with Mr. Fetchin.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
I'll ramble.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to vamp everybody. So I love digital only content. I think it's the best. I would rather, I mean, if you look at it, if you had 100 people paying you $5 and all you have to do is upload a PDF, it's kind of the easiest thing in the world. You don't have to worry about fulfillment. You don't have to worry about going to the post office. It's not $1 million campaign. The only thing that's really kind of itchy there is the lack of big dollars, but that's nothing. I love digital only rewards. As Tom Zoller confirms, people who back at the digital level are handsome people, powerful people, and his favorite people. I totally agree. My last campaign was for this game book, which I wanted to ship internationally. How do I do this? I don't want it to be just it's just my enormous face. I wanted to ship this internationally first class and also ship it in the United States first class because it's a zine. It should be lightweight, fit in an envelope. But I made the paper quality thicker. I made the paper stock thicker. I added pages. And the maximum weight for mailing something in the US, USPS first class is 3.5 ounces. And this book by itself weighs 3.5 ounces. So suddenly I charged people in Europe. This is me trying to explain. I'm not smart. So just recently, there was only like 10 of them. People who just bought this in Europe paid $5 for shipping. They paid $5 for shipping, and it cost me $11 to ship it. So because as the campaign grew and grew and grew, yes, it brought the price per copy of the book down, but all the improvements I made to the book increased the weight, increased the size, and all those things affected my shipping costs, which, I'm following that up with another campaign. We're doing exactly the same size. And every time I ship something out, I went to the new campaign page and updated shipping prices to make sure it was reflected the changes that happened on January 22nd.
I just averted the cat vomit on the bed.
Good job. Good job.
He's already done it once this week. So if anybody who has a cat knows the joy of coming after a long day, like, I'm gonna lay down here and take crap.
Oh yeah. Oh great. I want to spend the next hour and a half
washing my sheets.
Yeah. And it's Tom Zoller points out, printing scales, but shipping does not. That's absolutely true. And the holiday shipping schedule in the United States is from beginning of October till the end of January. There's a 4-month holiday window of additional costs. And when that winds down, it's usually tied to a price increase that makes it almost as expensive as it was before. So shipping is always going to be more expensive. Now, there's ways around that. There are a couple of other Kickstarter crowdfunding sites like, Patreon is kind of more for recurring support, but there's IndieGoGo and Zoop and others, and BackerKit. And BackerKit was primarily a kind of an add-on feature to Kickstarter, and had a lot of the features that Kickstarter didn't have. Like, it gave people the ability during the time when you would review your order, hey, you've made this pledge, let me collect our information. Do you want the book signed? What size shirt do you want? And while we've got you here, do you want to buy any other things? And that post-campaign sales mechanism worked really well. Eventually, Kickstarter was like, why are we letting them have, and also what BackerKit did was they also did the shipping, and they would take less of a cut than Kickstarter. So a lot of campaigns will say, here's the price of the item, we'll figure out shipping later. Often with the campaigns we're talking about in the gaming side of things, where it's a hardcover book and it won't ship for 2 years, they don't want to figure out the shipping now because they have no idea what it'll be like then.
Right. And shipping does go up.
Go up
every year.
Yeah.
Every year, I think, was it usually in August or so before the fall, they announced, I seem to remember like the last 2 years that they did that. But so you just to sort of recap, is we figure out what we're going to make, we figure out how we're going to make it, and then we figure out how we're going to get it from us to you, me to you, and then you make your campaign, because now you have all your you know what your expenses are, you know where it's going, you figure out how long it's going to take you to make it, how long it's going to, you've gotten all your bids from your printers, so you have a pretty good idea of those numbers. And then you said you triple that number. So if you said it was $2,000, you make it $6,000, and that should cover.
Yeah. If that's your cost that's a cost for doing things, and also how much are you yourself willing to kick into the thing? I feel there's a certain amount of sweat equity I want to put into it.
Yeah. So once you do that, then you sit down and you plan your campaign, or how you're going to make a video, what you're going to talk about, how much of the art you're going to show. Do you have art to show? Right. So because you're basically making your Kickstarter. Now, does Kickstarter itself have a format that's sort of fixed, like you just kind of plug these things in?
No, it's a blank WYSIWYG editor, like you're going into Microsoft Word or any WordPress interface, where you can place images and you can place a video, I believe. It has to be hosted elsewhere, I think. No, you can upload to their system. But you lay out the thing yourself and you create your own graphics. And that's a whole thing. If you check out my campaigns, I spend a lot of time making the graphics because part of it is I just presume people don't know who I am. And anyone coming in cold, I want to be able to put the best foot forward. And so that's one reason why I make the graphics as pretty as possible. There's a question also from Cutthroat Comics about what Kickstarter or some other system like BackerKit or Zoop. I like Kickstarter. It's the one people have the most familiarity with. People have accounts with them already, and they've got kind of a organic discovery system to some degree. They've got two ways you can be discovered cold from their system. One, if someone who you're following or someone you're connected with some way through their system backs a project, you'll be told, hey, Steve Conley just backed a project. Go check it out. So that's an interesting way to discover something. They also have a thing called Project We Love, which is their editorials. Yeah, their editors select a project, and that gets a lot more love. That one gets more favored in all the search results, and it can sometimes be in rotation on the front page of the site, and it's definitely on the front page of the category you're in, because everything in Kickstarter is organized by category: tech, or games, or music, or movies, or comics. Web comics have their own category.
So you because some of these campaigns are pretty slick. They shoot a nice video, they have good sound quality. Presentation, like you said, is very important, so that people feel like, oh, I'm going to back this thing. This thing looks good. It's not like, what is that? What did he say? I got to run the video back 4 times.
Yeah, sometimes it's a stock video, and it's just sort of like it's like a trailer that you just put your book in at the end, and it just shuffles onto the screen, and it's playing on like heavy rock-ish music.
So do you feel you have to make a video, or do you not have to make a video?
You don't have to. They are recommended. I think for the first few videos, I was never really comfortable being on camera. So my first campaigns, I never really presented myself, but later on I started to, as I got more comfortable, in front of a camera, and that helps a lot in the comic book space. People like to see the artist they're helping, and
that's the guy.
Or it's like in Artist Alley at a comic convention, that no one's better at selling your book than you. And, you can speak about it, your enthusiasm, your excitement. The video quality doesn't have to be all that. You don't have to have super lighting, you have to stuff, but audio quality is really important, because if it's staticky or bad, people will just stop listening. But it can be pixelated.
You want it to be clear and to the point. It doesn't have to be look like 4K or whatever, but
less than a minute, and take multiple takes. Get it until you get it right. You don't have to slice it all together. It doesn't have to be Kubrick. It just has to be at 1 minute at most. People have a lot of stuff to do. If you can't pitch it in a minute, then I don't know what you're doing.
What do they call it in Hollywood? The elevator pitch. If you can't
Yeah.
pitch it on the elevator, then right. And I imagine anyway with a comic, like, oh yeah, that's Steve, or that's Mike or Jamar. Great. They want to see the artwork. So did you have a formula or a theory of how much art you wanted to show in your Kickstarter to entice the people?
I don't know. Again, it feels like a portfolio. It's a question like what to show in your portfolio. I think you're better off with a tight 5 pages of your story than trying to show people everything and they hit that dud and makes them stop. I think you want to just boil it down, make it quick, give people a sense, give them a sense of what they're getting for their money. Again, a picture of the book, a mock-up, a Photoshop mock-up. There are Not Today on YouTube asks, are there some companies that help drive traffic to Kickstarters? Have I used them or considered them? I haven't used them. My projects, my biggest project might be $25,000 or something like that. It's not, to me, it's not worth. It's interesting because it's specific. This is a specific response to the comics side of things. I feel like art style functions like genre, so that when people see an art style from a distance, they have a sense immediately whether or not they like it or not. They don't even get, it's judging the book by the cover. That's kind of what they're doing with the art style. And I think if they look at my art style and they immediately recoil from it, there's no way I can win them back. Not in the course of a video, or not in a way that they're going to risk money for a book they'll get in a few months. So I don't focus on that kind of advertising. Specifically for my comic. I think if I were working in a more popular style, or if you're doing something that's adjacent to something else, like if you're doing something that's very Star Wars-y, then if you advertised to a Star Wars crowd, you might have more success than what I would have. I mean, unless there's a Terry Pratchett group I can chase with my work or something like that. I don't really know if there's no cross-pollination between what I'm doing and what somebody else is doing. That's particular to me. So that's why I haven't done it. I also don't do any Facebook advertising or Twitter advertising for my comics. I do Facebook advertising for the game stuff, though, because while my cartooning style is very European or whatever the heck it is, my art style for the gaming books is kind of more traditional. And I think that style is an easier sell to that crowd. And so an advertisement for that makes a bit more sense. Hey, David, how are you? We got some bunch of comments here. Oh boy. One recommendation for video audio: if you're going to edit it, try to remove pauses. It shortens the length and helps keep people's focus. Yeah, I think jump cuts are fine. Some people complain about jump cuts. I think they're fine. There's a lot of silliness is going on. This is all very silly.
In the chat room, yeah.
In the chat. So let's talk about some tips. I know we've got a lot of questions. The main thing with the goals, I would say, is be realistic about your goals. Have a long, hard look at what your project is, and what you think a fair price for that project is. I feel, to me, that's a big problem that a lot of people have. You want on your Kickstarter campaign page to explain clearly what it is you're offering. Let people know what it is and why you're doing it, and make it a personal appeal if you can. The gaming side of things doesn't have that. It's way more, it's a colder environment than the comic side of things. But the comics, make it a warm appeal. Tell them why you're doing this, why you're excited, and let them get to know you in a way. Unless you're awful, then hide yourself.
I'm hideous, but please back my campaign.
No, hideous is fine. I make it work. But it's the if you're an awful person, then yeah, don't do that. But figure out how many supporters you think you might have. Here's how you set your goal: how many supporters might you have, and how much is your product? And then you just do the multiplication. How many of my backers are willing to pay me $25 for my hardcover book? And that's your goal. That you think you'll hit that goal. And if you're going to lose money with that proposition, then don't do it. And if you're going to make money with that proposition, go forward with it.
Do you know people? I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, do you know people who launched a Kickstarter that failed to kick, retooled it, relaunched it, and was successful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of comeback stories like that. There's I think our friends Jamar, Rich, and John did that with a Kickstarter. I think it was like really close. They came back, tweaked a few things, and they they knocked it out of the park.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So David from YouTube. Hey, David. David Peterson asks, when you're getting a printing quote pre-Kickstarter, what quantity are you quoting? Okay, I could get. Here's a thing about this. I'm quoting it based on my expectation, and knowing that the price could go down if I exceed expectations. So I'm basing it on my modest expectations. If it's something that requires a higher minimum order in order to make it work, like the playing cards in my latest Kickstarter, or T-shirts. T-shirts are very expensive if you're going to do 10 of them, but if you're going to do 100 of them, suddenly they become the whole thing's a lot easier. Make a special offer version, like early birds get a package with the book and a T-shirt, and try to push those things. Try to bump up the numbers to get the T-shirt things to make sense. And when I'm doing that with the cards, I'm packaging the zine and the cards together so that I can bring the cost per deck down.
Now, would you recommend, if people are going to do a Kickstarter, to do, I guess what I'm thinking of is sort of a clean Kickstarter to start, where you don't have a lot of extra things that you're tossing in the box, just to run through, advertise your comic, print your comic, get your comic out, and then go, now I know what it took to do that. Now, if I want to add a poster to it, or this or that or something else, now I know next time I have an idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I prefer those campaigns. I prefer a simple three or four choices on the list. My current campaign, the death dealing one, is a mess. It's just too many options for people. And then I package them together in a complicated way. My next campaign will not do that. I'm going to offer each individual item as a single standalone item. And if you want to bundle it with other things, go to the add-on section and do it there. There might be one overall package at the end that has everything in it if you want to go all in. But I think having individual items, or the middle age is going to be a book, maybe a T-shirt, and then back issues, and then the previous volumes of the book. Your first project is almost always simpler because your subsequent projects are going to offer your back catalog as add-ons. And it's a fascinating thing for cartoonists. You might have a page of artwork and you've tried to sell this thing on eBay for a year, or for years. No one's buying your artwork. You bring it to conventions. You've lugged this thing around the country. It's a well-traveled page and it hasn't been sold. You create a Kickstarter, and for the top level tier, you include that piece of artwork and you add $100, $200 to the price, and people will snap it up. When you're buying in Kickstarter, that fear of missing out, that credit card purchase outside a convention setting where the entire room is competing for their money, or right. It's a thing where you can move things and you can get them for the value that they have, and not with all the competition that sometimes comes from some of those other environments.
Right. So yeah, because I know I would imagine that the more difficult you make your first Kickstarter, or the more complicated, like, do you ship the books to yourself, and then you use rocket ship or pirate ship, and you get your mailers and your bags and your printer, and you print it all out yourself, and you take it all up to the, which can be a lot of work. Or do you decide, well, I don't want to do that. I want to print it, but I don't want to have to ship it out myself. So I'm going to hire one of those outside facilities. So do you have any of those that you recommend?
I know Kablam, which is part of Indie Planet, and it's a print on demand service out of Orlando, Florida, and they are a print on demand company run by two people who make comics. So I like their work a lot because they know what comics are supposed to feel like. They know what comics are supposed to look like. They're supposed to arrive in pristine condition. And so they will do fulfillment for people. So what you have to do is contact them. They'll tell you the cost. You let them know how many pages it's going to be, what format, color, or I think they do perfect binding. And they can offer various formats and styles, and they will do all the fulfillment for you. Even a case where if you want to make the book signed, they'll mail you pages that you have to sign, and they'll insert those into the book, or there'll be a hole on the cover where you'll sign it and they'll print around the signature. They'll work out something. They're really smart. And they're at Kablam, ka-blam.com. But do a search online. They do terrific work, and they handle all the fulfillment. You don't have to do a thing.
Right. And now I know you overprint because you want to have some to take with you to conventions or to sell later. So you are sort of figuring that in too. You're not printing to sell out. You're printing to have extra material, extra stock, basically.
Yeah, I'm doing that, and also thinking about the next Kickstarter campaign, and also knowing that if I print 50 or 100 extra copies, I'll have them for my next Kickstarter campaign. And if I've got the price down, then it's going to make the whole thing make more sense. So James got a question. This is a little off topic. I make miniatures. I sculpt minis and have I work with a casting company that actually makes them. He asked about they package everything up, and those little boxes. The stickers I have to buy separately from Avery and put those on, and I ship those. I send those labels to the casting company, and they put them on the boxes for me. So they could look like anything. That was just the design I went with.
So you didn't print the labels. You got the labels printed and had the labels shipped to the place that's fulfilling the.
Yeah. They'll do it for you too.
You're like a traffic manager then. You're like your shipping manager, I should say.
Part of this Kickstarter thing is having that kind of willingness to handle it all. I mean, there are days where I can't feel my fingers because of the tape, or there's the flat mailers I use for the zines. There's a self-adhesive label, and it goes right under your fingernail every time you peel it off. And so after about 50 of them, I'm like, I'm done for the day. Nope. I'm gonna heal. So that's part of it. It's silly, but it's like I could give someone else part of my money. But I'm a control freak. It's how I like the idea that there's this silly book made by a guy in a second bedroom in his apartment in Florida who wrote everything, drew everything, packaged everything, included a note to every person. I personalize a note to every person who orders from me. I sign it. I mail it out myself, and then they get it. To me, that's kind of awesome.
You're like Santa Claus making toys for all the children.
Very much like Santa Claus.
Well,
the struggle is real. Yeah. I think
you're just drinking Coca-Cola after Coca-Cola, just like the chubby old elf himself.
All right, I'm gonna chug through my notes here. Make sure I cover it. We covered a lot of it. I knew we would, kind of organically. But if people have questions, please put them in chat. I know we've been trying to address them along the way, but if there's something I missed, Steve is like Santa in 6. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Create the realistic mock-up. Link to your website in your Kickstarter page. Your Kickstarter page is going to get a lot of people to come to that page, and maybe they won't support your Kickstarter. Maybe they'll kick the tires and go no, but they will go to your website to find out more about you. And I find that when I'm running a Kickstarter campaign, my website traffic goes up. So if you make a webcomic, link to it. Let people read it, because you might not make a sale, but you might make a fan.
Right.
Digital rewards are your friend. The thing about a price for your object, for whatever you're selling, I'd say the main condition was make it appealing. Make it an appealing price, the kind of thing where someone sees that and goes, that's a very good price for that. I'm getting a deal. I know that's tough to do. The key price in Kickstarter is $25, according to Kickstarter itself. That's the sweet spot.
Under 25 or 25?
25. that 25 is a sweet spot. People have their credit card out. I don't know if they did polling or if they just have site-wide metrics for, I don't know, 100,000 purchases, but $25 is very comfortable. Higher than that declines, and lower than that might also decline. I like having a $25 price. That's why my books are 25, and my margins aren't as good as they could be. But I know I'd rather have a new reader, and that's part of that's the trade-off there. I'd much rather have the sale and get a reader for my book who will be on board for everything else I do. So $25 is the key. I like to also
that's interesting. It's maybe it's also has to do with it's special, and it's the perception of value. I mean, that has a lot to do, really everything to do with when you're asking someone to buy a handmade, off-brand object, right? You know, I mean, like, I mean, we've all seen it at a convention. You know, there's the person sitting behind the table with their comic, and they're like, "What are you?" You know, they're trying to get you to come over, and people are like, "No." They actually walk further. They'll walk further away from the table. So there really is in comics. I know that in my experience, there is the perception of value. Just like Jack Kirby signed your comic, the perception is, oh, it's worth more money because he signed it, right?
Right.
There's a lot of psychology that goes into the whole, like, not $9.95, you know,
right,
$5.95. You never see like $13.19. You never see weird prices like that, because they've spent, you know, $1 zillion to figure out that there are certain numbers that the consumer goes, oh, 99 cents, okay, you know.
Yeah, but $1.03, $1.03 is too much. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You know, if it's like $1.19, they're like, 99 cents, okay. $1.19. You know.
Yeah.
So
a ton of weird psychology.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it has. I mean, when you go into a supermarket, people don't think about it. A supermarket's design is all about psychology. It's all about trying to get you to buy that product, and the center of the supermarket is like the most consumer product dense part. The outside of it is all like, you know, your vegetables and your milk and your dairy, like, you know, like just like raw food, raw stuff. And then the inside is all that super competition between Coke and Pepsi and Nabisco and, you know, whoever, you know, to get you to buy that processed stuff. And there's a lot of psychology and how the boxes are displayed, how they're designed, the colors that are used. I mean, there's all that stuff. So I'm assuming that Kickstarter is using the same sort of metrics, of knowing that, you know, books that cost this much sold really well. Books that were like, hey, kickstart me, it's, you know, it's $250, and they're like, no, I'm not giving you $250, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the perception. And I think, to me, one of the things I was excited about doing this subject is that the entire nature of the business has so changed fundamentally because of things like Kickstarter, that as a young artist, you could come out and you can start kickstarting and publishing your own work, reaching an audience, doing web comics, building an audience that simply was not possible when I was coming into the business. Like I said, I tried to self-publish stuff very early on, and it was really impossible to, or very difficult to, get people to see your product, because there's only a few fan publications, like the Buyer's Guide,
right,
Comics Journal, a few other public. There was, so how would somebody even know about your comic,
Right.
right? To build the audience, you just had to have money to burn and hope that you reached enough momentum eventually that you could continue to go on. It was a lot more difficult. And now, the internet really makes that so much easier to do. So I think
I would say somewhat, because it's still challenging, because all the social media is so much more hostile. It's so much harder to make a splash, because it's been overrun by bots and by marketing weasels, and everyone's screaming for attention, and it's a lot harder to create a genuine connection than it was. I think there was kind of a sweet spot for social media a few years ago, and I think it's getting more awful. And so that's hard. So but there are other places you go. You go to Twitch, you go to YouTube, you go to TikTok, and you find your audiences there. And then the best thing about this is, when back in the day, finding an audience had to be 50,000 people, or why do you bother? Now there are Kickstarters with 400 people backing it, and they're making $20,000, $30,000, minus 10%, minus the cost, minus everything else.
right.
But they're much more successful with smaller audiences. There's a in the gaming world, there is a company called Dwarven Forge. I hope I got that right. They make gaming miniatures that you put your miniatures on, the little environments. They make the environments that the miniatures sit on, and they do beautiful work. And they launched a Kickstarter the other day, and with about 400 people backing it, they were a little over $300,000.
Wow.
And that's with 400 people. And back in the day, there was no point even turning a machine on or doing anything if you weren't going to sell tens of thousands, 100,000. So now you get to make things in a much smaller way and be more successful with them. So yes, that to me, the opportunity is not as much that you can reach those audiences and make all that money. You can find a niche audience and you can survive. And maybe you'll be a hit, because again, all that being a hit, being a smash success, is always very personal, and who knows what that means.
There's
a lot of luck there, right? Oh, and Tony sums it up very nicely. This is a thing I see from a lot of people. A lot of advice they give people, and they never admit the part that marry someone who has health insurance, who could give you health insurance.
Well, there's a lot of creatives whose partners have the health insurance,
Right. Well, I have a few other questions here. Not today. The YouTubes asks, is there a ratio of new views on Kickstarter to new views on your page? Not really. I just noticed a spike in traffic during that time. I don't really do that kind of analytics for my website that way.
And do they decide how long the campaign is, or do you?
You do. You can decide. They recommend having it under 30 days. They say those are more effective. And given that they have a financial interest in your success, I kind of take them at their word for that. My latest campaign is 21 days. I'm going to do a 3-week gaming one. I like it to be about a month. I like to, not because I like the stress of the middle of it. But I think the gaming ones are I'm probably better off making the gaming one slightly longer and the comic book one slightly shorter. Because also one of the things is, if you have a really strong launch, let's say you've got a really reliable mailing list, and you've got a really strong, there's always so much to cover. Before your Kickstarter page, we talked about before, Mike, you set up your Kickstarter page, you put in all your information, you tie in your bank account, you figure out when you're going to launch, you set your goal, you build your tiers, you design your page, then you submit it to them for approval. Kickstarter has to approve the page to make sure it meets their terms. Things aren't screwy. And I'm sure there's content guidelines as well. But then if they approve it, usually takes 2 to 3 days. But if you build a track record with them, I submit my stuff for approval and I get approved immediately. So once you have a track record, it's instantaneous. That approval doesn't mean you go live. That just means you can go live whenever you want. So you submit it for approval. That process also generates your URL. So a little tip, I provide a very short URL, a very short name for my project. For instance, my project was simply called Death Dealing. That's the title of the book. It has a subhead. It has a very long colon, a deadly card throwing rogue subclass for 5th edition. I didn't include that in the name of my title, so Kickstarter gave me a nice short URL. And then once they approved it, then I changed the name because the URL was already determined at that point. So have a short URL, a short name, they build you your page. At that point, once that page is built, you can set it up for a coming soon page where people can sign up to be notified when your campaign goes live. And so there's a big notify me button on the page and it shows your artwork. That's it. It's just the title of the project, the
coming soon,
and you hit that notify me button. When your page goes live, it emails everyone who's asked to be notified. And that's not you, that's coming from Kickstarter. And when the Death Dealing launched today, it had 186 people lined up, which I've never had that number before, of that high a number of people. And I find that the people following your campaign, basically when you put on the notify list, they are about 1/3 of them tend to be backers. Right. That seems to be the number I've seen. Okay. The cool thing about people who are saying notify me, also, there are 2 important deadlines. As your project is coming to a close, and I set mine to end around 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. I've tried later than that. I think 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock is a better time. 8 hours before the end of your campaign and 24 hours before the end of your campaign, the system will automatically remind people who are following that project that it's ending. Hey, this project's ending in 24 hours. Hey, this project's ending in 8 hours. So if you ended at 2 a.m., they're going to get their reminder at 2 a.m. So ended at 9, so they're going to get the reminder at 9. You know what I mean? So if you think about 24 hours and 8 hours beforehand, if plan backwards from that time, because that's when the reminders are being sent out. And if you end your campaign, if you don't specify an end time and just say it's going to run 30 days and just hit the launch button whenever, your campaign can end at 4:15 a.m. on a Thursday. Nobody's awake,
sleeping, right? Yeah.
The reminders are going off in the middle of the night. No, it's all plan that ending time and then live stream or talk to people or something like that. My next campaign is going to end while I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm going to miss the ending of my campaign, but that feels thematic. Do I have any thoughts on the inverted bell curve for backers? That's what we were talking about before, about the kind of fallow horseshoe shape in the middle there. Just don't go crazy. Don't feel like you need to beat the bushes all the time. Accept that part's going to be quiet. Don't stress about it. Don't ever look at KickTrack. KickTrack is a website which extrapolates how your campaign is going to do based on the first day's success. So if you make $1,000 on day 1 and it's a 30-day campaign, it presumes you're going to make $30,000. But it doesn't, because that U shape, and that'll drive you a little nuts. KickTrack provides some really interesting data. Don't get me wrong, but it's also got that one chart that will basically mess with your head. And Cutthroat is asking, is $5 for a new comic too much these days? I would look at other Kickstarters in your genre with your style of artwork and your level of, and your type of content, if it's adult content versus kids content, or if it's depending on what genre it is, you'll get a lot of insight from other people doing something similar. And I would look at their pricing, and if their campaign was successful, that will tell you what to do. Right now on Kickstarter, a printed comic book can be $10, and people don't seem to blink if it is quality. A comic book you can't sell for $10 in a comic book store, not unless it's bagged or, it's a variant or something like that.
Right. I'm sort of curious as to the amount of people doing the standard 22-page floppy as opposed to, something a little bit more, something more like a graphic novel. 48, 50, 64, you're getting a sizable chunk for your investment, for what you're paying for. And it seems to me that just looking where the growth of the comic book business is not in the direct market. It's in the markets outside of that, and that's the graphic novels, and people are getting a whole story. They're not like, oh, here's 22 pages and then come back in 6 months for the next there's got to be another Kickstarter for the next 22 pages. I think, yeah, like Tom's saying, I would think that you would want to have a substantial story, like a graphic novel for.
Yeah, but you can look at the comic section and there are people who just have it's a 32-page comic and it's $10.
Really?
And then they'll do a variant cover. They'll do 10 variant covers, and people buy the whole pack of them. $80 for 5 books or something like that. It is really an interesting collector's market. That's kind of a speculator area I'm not as familiar with. But there are some of these printers who do print on demand. I don't think Kablam does it, but we'll do a metal cover. And that's a big thing that some people like. And that's really, it's, an offshoot from the old hologram chromium covers of the 90s. There was another question here from a comment from JRD about buying a URL. I tend to buy a convenient URL. I'll name my book based on the URL I can get. This would have been a Death Dealer Rogue, but you're stepping on Frazetta's toes if you call anything Death Dealer. And I don't want to be compared to his work ever. So, but deathdealing.com was available. So that's the name of my book.
There you go. And then somewhere along the line, some rock group is going to come along called Death Dealing, and they're going to offer to buy your website for a lot of money.
That's fine. I should have made that a tier. Okay, let's see. I think I covered most of the stuff I had on my list here. Stretch goals, video. Does anybody else have any other questions? There's a ton of stuff we could talk about, but I'm a big fan of realistic goals, low realistic goals that you can hit and build. Think of your Kickstarter as your first Kickstarter, and that you're building a reputation for your next Kickstarter. If you have a Kickstarter, and even if it's small, and you deliver, and people like what they get, they will back your next one. And you're going to build an audience that will grow with you. And, and then it'll slowly grow. And I feel like that's how all the good comic conventions started. They started small. They were in a hotel. They grew. Eventually they get to the convention center. They keep growing. Sure, they want to have big giant years and they want to, blow the doors off. But slow, steady, incremental growth is how I built my freelance career, my webcomic career. My whole life has been this kind of thing. I would love for there to be I would love to win the lottery. And I'll keep hoping that one of these things will click, but in that way, but I'm a big fan.
I mean, it seems like it's the nice thing about it is that it's a goal that you can set for yourself that that you can fulfill. So it's not like you're setting yourself up to randomly have to scramble around. If you planned it all out, it should be 1, 2, 3, 4 out the door.
Right.
I think in my experience, what I've seen, the people that tend to fail are the people who are not good at judging how long it takes them to produce the work, which is the thing that people have in the beginning of their careers. Like, I know how long it takes me to produce a page or a strip or a painting. I'm good at being able to judge how much time it's going to take me to draw 22 pages, right? Often in the beginning, though, you're not really sure how long it's going to take you to draw 22 pages. It might take you, twice as long one time and half as long as the next, So
Right.
It seems like you have to be realistic in how long it takes you to produce your artwork, because that's what you're going to spend most of your time on, is producing the artwork. And if you don't have the artwork, you're not going to be able to fulfill your campaign on time. And it seems like most people, because I've seen there's late Kickstarters, most people are like, okay, like you said, they're okay with it. Take a little bit longer. What I've seen looks good. You're not avoiding, talking to people and answering their questions. Because even in the direct market, I mean, there's a lot of books that are late, a lot of books that never, you know, you get first issue, second issue, and you never get the third issue. So it seems like the best thing is you get to sort of do it on your own time. If you know it's going to take you 6 months, you can sort of plan that into your Kickstarter.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's two comments here, both from YouTube. It kind of dovetail together. First was a James saying $100 Kickstarter, here we come, and that's kind of a joke. But my last Kickstarter was that my Intoximancy was a stretch goal that I didn't unlock with a little minis campaign I had done. That minis campaign had 113 backers. It was a fine little thing. It was my first effort of making the sculpts I was doing and this kind of stuff I did here on the channel into little figures for gamers of my characters from my webcomic. I always wanted toys of my characters, and so I got to make them. There was a stretch goal we never unlocked called Intoximancy. It was going to be a little PDF. Then Kickstarter, another benefit of Kickstarter is that they have events. Like Make 100 is in January. It's encouraging people to make 100 of something, a very small boutique item. It could be pins or postcards or comic books. And it's very modest. It's January. People have already spent all their money at Christmas. It's a very slow month for money anyway. Make 100 is a great campaign they've got. They also have a thing called Zine Quest, which is specifically for gamers and people who want to make simple game books, usually something that's saddle stitched, stapled. So I do my campaign for 113 backers for my minis. And then I decide Zine Quest was right around the corner. I'm going to solicit this book. And my goal, I'll make it $50. I'm going to make it so low. But then I started putting all this work into it and making the art so much nicer and getting quotes from printers and thinking, man, I can make this thing in color. Oh, I can make this thing with spot varnish if I get the right pricing on it. I could do all these fancy things. And then it might raise my goal to 1,000. And this ties into a question Not Today was asking, have your expectations changed the more you've done Kickstarters? Did any campaign surprise you? This campaign did. It had a goal of $1,000 and was a spin-off from a project that raised about 5,000 with 113 backers. And this had 450 backers and raised almost 10. So This grew out of nowhere. It was a thing I was going to give away, but I ended up investing a ton of time to do paintings and rules and schmancy end papers and tons of illustrations and just all sorts of craziness. You can really see the spot varnish and the ring.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So that really surprised me, and that was moving into the gaming space where I experimented with things like doing a lot more to cross promote. When I did my last collection of Astounding Space Thrills, which was collecting my old webcomic, Jeff Smith was running his Tukey campaign, and we swapped promotion back and forth. I'm certain that helped me. I don't know if I helped him much, but it certainly helped me. So those things surprised me. That kind of friendly attitude where your campaign and another campaign can cross promote each other. I would recommend not trying to promote more than one other campaign in an update. So if you're going to promote people, come up with a reason to send up another update to include it. And what I do is when I post an update saying, here's an update on my project, the printer's got the files, the books have arrived from the printer. Oh, by the way, here's another project you might want to support. But if you include multiple ones, I feel like that's going to be less effective. And then Shelley asked, we talked about this last time, the printers. I use Ingram Spark for my graphic novels, and I've been using Mixam for the gaming books. I really like Mixam's work. They package everything better. Their production quality is quite a bit sharper. Those spines are perfectly level. They do amazing work. And then for comic books, I like Kablam. And for cards, I'm drawing a blank.
Like playing cards, you mean?
Yeah, I made little game cards for that accompanied my little figures. Comics. Wellspring. It's a curious URL. Maybe someone out there knows the name of it. But those are the printers I used. I've used Mixam and I've used Ingram Spark, and they do an excellent job. And that's it. While we've been streaming, there's been a bunch of people who've decided to support. This is still day one of the campaign. This is the big day. It's been really exciting to see, people jump on board. I hope everyone does have a good experience with their own kickstarting. I just here's what I would say. Make sure you just plan things to be modest. If you want to have a fancy lenticular cover or you want to have a hardcover book, make that a stretch goal. Make your stretch goals things that you'd like to invest in the book. If you want the paper quality to be better, make it a stretch goal. Hey, we hit this number, the books will be better quality. That way you can produce a more modest book if you don't hit that goal and save yourself a lot of money and save yourself shipping. Thicker paper costs a lot more to ship.
Oh yeah.
So
stock is a lot heavier.
Any plans to do a mix-em run for hardcovers of your comics? Not yet. Possibly. For my graphic novels, I was using Ingram Spark, and it's important to me that the third book matches the format. And these guys have a matte finish cover, which feels velvety, and I would want all three books to feel the same, even if this company in particular is really bad at lining things up on the spine. Their error rating, their error ratio is a little too high for me. And their packaging isn't as good. The boxes you get from Mix'em are like bulletproof. They're thick-walled box. This is the dumb stuff we focus on. They're thick-walled boxes with cardboard inserts separating things and tons of paper padding. And all that padding comes out, and I put it in a bag. And when I'm shipping out minis, I'm using that paper again. So I have like trash bags full of paper that I'm going to use for packing things up. Reuse every bit of it. Save yourself money. The minis that I get shipped come in a giant box, and it's full of bubble wrap, and that bubble wrap wraps up books. It's just,
Why not? Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. You have the third bedroom that's just full of bubble wrap.
There's a closet. It's ridiculous. Well, the Mix'em books come in clear plastic bags, so they're the perfect large clear plastic bags. So they're the perfect thing to hold those kind of shipping supplies. And Mix'em also has excellent customer service, as JRD is mentioning. Yes, you can get a person on the phone with them. Bill, I'm so glad you found that information helpful. I hope that helps you with your books. But if I hadn't done, if Mix'em was around when I started this project, or if I'd heard of them, I'm not sure when they came onto the scene. When I started the middle age, I probably would have gone with them. I like the quality of their work a lot. Some differences there. Mix'em is more expensive for the initial. Oh my gosh, we're running late. I'm so sorry. Mix'em has a very, very expensive for the first few. Unless you get the numbers up, you want to have a higher quantity to get the discounts at Mix'em. Ingram Spark doesn't really have discounts. They do slightly, but you're not going to get the savings you get at Mix'em. But it'll be much cheaper if you do fewer copies. But those companies are mostly for the hardcovers, I think of. If you're going to do a floppy comic book, you're going to do a comic book, a classic comic book, talk to Kablam or somebody like that.
Great.
All right. I've rambled enough. Great. Gone over an hour and 44. I'm terribly sorry, everybody.
It's all solid gold information, Mr. Connolly.
I hope folks found it helpful.
Well, I know a lot of people are interested in it, and maybe they don't know anyone who's done it, and like I said, it just seems like this is just sort of like the new way of getting your work out there, just like doing webcomics,
Yeah. It's I don't know how I would do this. I had a technical support question with Kickstarter today, and my last response with them was just to please high five everyone there, because I don't know how I would do this without them. Between Kickstarter and Patreon, and I talk a little bit about IndieGoGo and Zoop and these other services that are out there, and there are others, and there will be a bunch more. And there's probably there's a good reason to diversify, to work with multiple systems, to work with BackerKit. With their crowdfunding, because the more different systems out there, if Kickstarter goes away tomorrow for whatever reason, you want to have a backup plan. But that's why you have your mailing list. At the end of every one of your Kickstarters, and possibly with other crowdfunding services, there's a survey. The question you must include on it, I'm telling you must. I'm never prescriptive. Would you like to be on my mailing list? Because you could Shanghai everybody. You could just take them all and put them on your list, and that's not cool. And it probably violates terms of service with your mailing list provider. But ask them, get them on your mailing list, because no matter what happens, you want to stay connected with them. It's the most important thing you can do. That's the main survey question: is do you want to be put on my mailing list?
And then you're able to export that to your actual mailing list.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so and then I use MailerLite. That's a service I use. MailChimp's good too. Yeah, and that's gold, Jerry.
Well, I guess so that wraps us up for this week. We'll be back next week. I don't think JAMAR will be with us again next week.
That gives us
another.
Yes, Cutthroat. Kablam is good for comic books. But yes, so everyone has to subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. We're apparently very close to our 1,000. Share
this with a friend of yours who's interested in doing a Kickstarter. And then your friend can also subscribe and share it to one of their friends, another friend.
And so, Mike, where can people find you online?
People can find me daily on Instagram at Draw Manley or Mike Manley on Facebook, or on the funny pages at comicskingdom.com. That's where I am
for 13 years.
For 13 years, yes. But that's where I am daily.
Fantastic.
I gave up my I didn't deactivate it, but I sort of gave up my Twitter. That was sort of interesting. Everybody was there. It was like, screw Elon Musk. We're all gonna get up. And then I noticed, well, wait a minute. I thought everybody was getting off of Twitter, but everybody's still on Twitter.
Yeah, and it's kind of a there's a lot of people saying it's going to end any second now, I think there's just too many good engineers who probably can keep everything going as long as it can. I just think it's becoming, it was on a steady decline in terms of its usefulness beforehand. And that decline is only increasing because,
he also
kind of walled garden. Was that?
He also kind of shut his mouth. He was like pew, pew every day. He was like doing something, and maybe, I don't know if anyone can get through rockheads like that, but this is like, dude, you're kind of like blowing billions of dollars here. Maybe a little less pew 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 every day, because he's not saying all the crazy stuff they seemed like he was saying 2 months ago.
I don't know. I probably blocked him a few years ago. I don't know. I go in there, I see a few people, and I log off. It's not a obsession. It's not a place for me to obsess over. I kind of use it as best I can, knowing that it's clunky now, and that not as many people are on it, and that I'm getting less visibility than I was before. So all that stuff just contributes to who knows. But occasionally, I'm sorry.
Where can people find you? If
people
not
can find me,
the Clunk. Formerly known as Twitter.
People can find me on Twitter at the Steve Conley. Find me at Instagram, Instagram.com/Steve Conley. I got in on the ground floor of that one. You can find my Kickstarter at deathdealing.com for my latest if you're into the gaming sort of thing. And if you're not, that's fine. And read the Middle Age Comic at middleagecomic.com. And
are you still on Webtoons?
Yep, on Webtoons, Tapas, and Go Comics. You can find the Middle Age in all those places. And yeah,
you are the internet. You are the internet, Steve Conley. You are the internet.
There's only one reason not to read my comic, is that you just don't like it. It can't be that because you can't find it.
That's right. It's right? You open up the window to put your laundry out.
It should be in there. You open up your freezer. You're gonna go for some ice cream, and there's my comic sitting right there. That's what I want. Yeah. That's what I want. All right, everybody. Thank you all for being here. You were fantastic. Thank you for indulging my rambling and being very kind to me. I hope you all have a beautiful week. And Mike Manley, shall we end it with our hygienic ending?
Wash our Kirby. Still in the pandemic. So everybody remember to wash those Kirby hands or Ditko hands.